Hello, hello, and welcome back. I'm so glad you're here. This Mind, Body, Soul Mastery podcast is a place where we explore what it really means to live with intention, to lead from the heart, and to walk through life with a deeper connection to mind, body, and soul. And so, whether it's I'm sitting down with a guest or just sharing what I'm learning in real time, my hope is that you'll hear something today that invites you back to yourself, where your truth lies. So take a deep breath and let's drop into today's conversation. And I have a guest with me today. Becky Harley joins me to share how the creative Zentangle Method became a lifeline after the death of her mom. This artistic way helped Becky process her grief and helped her to reconnect with herself and that sense of purpose that we all have. Becky, welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Hello. Oh, it's a pleasure having you. And I so appreciate talking about grief, and the heaviness of that is not always the easy and um, the easiest thing. And yet I just feel it's so vital that we start talking about grief and talking about our process, because every single one of us on this planet are going to go through it at some point. So
Yeah,
I'm all about let's embrace grief and let's normalize it, make it part of a conversation so that we can help each other when it hits someone we know. So,
exactly. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Becky, can you kind of take us back to that moment that shifted within you?
Yeah. So I mean, just a very brief background about me, I guess. As you might be able to tell, I'm in the UK. My mum lived not that far away from me, maybe an hour's drive, which is not was quite far in UK
Yeah.
terms, but maybe not in US terms. And then we would spend a lot of time together. I have two small children, and she would often come and kind of help out and help me look after them and stuff. And I was kind of aware that her health had not been its best for quite some time. Um, and I felt, I wanted to help her with that. I found it, well, I was kind of encouraging her to try and look after herself better, but you can't change people, so I kind of
Mm,
had to just accept that she was
yeah.
doing her own thing in her own way. Um, and then one night we had a call in the middle of the night, and found that she had passed away very suddenly. She wasn't sort of specifically ill, but I knew that her health wasn't great. And so obviously, like, when that happens and you lose a parent, it's a huge thing. And it's something that, perhaps people have thought about, or, everyone, I guess, everyone who has parents knows that, you know, I suppose the preference is that you will have to deal with their passing rather than them having to deal with your passing. But
Yes.
and it's something that people will have to go through, but you never kind of know how you'll feel until that hits you and it happens. Um, and yeah, like obviously it was quite a physical reaction for me. Like obviously I cried and screamed and shouted and stuff, but I remember thinking very um being interested, sort of having an almost out of body experience where
Mm-hmm.
I was sat in my bed in the middle of the night and had, put layers on and I was just physically shivering. Like it was an interesting
Mm,
kind of quite visceral reaction to that shock, I suppose it was.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I'm a quite a practical kind of person, and I got up the next morning and we were trying to move house at the time, and we had someone coming to view the house, so I cleaned and tidied the house. I took my kids to school. And it was kind of little bursts that for me of processing, that the
Yeah.
shock and everything. So I went, back to my hometown with my brother, and we kind of did all the stuff that you have to do when you lose someone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but my mum was an artist, and she, I think I've always thought that I've kind of taken elements of her creativity, or that's within me as well. I've always been interested in creativity and art, and I'm as a self-employed person from before my children were born. I was a wedding photographer, or still am a wedding photographer. Um, and so it was interesting. My parents met at a photography class, so it must have been in the genes somewhere. Um, but yeah, so was kind of having to sort all of the physical kind of things apart from all of the admin, and sorting out her house and all of her belongings. And she was a bit of a hoarder, so she had a lot of stuff. um, and we came across an awful lot of art supplies and creative bits and bobs that she had. And one of the things that I was aware that she was doing, and she had shared with me, was Zentangle. And it was something that when she first introduced me to it, I was heavily pregnant with my second child, my son. He was born in November of 2020, which was a bit of a stressful time, at the best of
Mm,
times.
mm.
But she did a beginner's course where she taught myself and a few other family members via Zoom, our beginner's course for a beginner's class of Zentangle. And I remember thinking at the time, like, this is great, like, but I don't have the I don't have the
Mm.
headspace for this right now. I've got a 2-year-old and a newborn baby on the way. So I kind of put it to one side, and I, then went ahead, and I was, being a mom and running a business and all of that and dealing with COVID and stuff. And so it was only when I then went through her property and her belongings that I kind of found all of these amazing pieces of art that she'd created through the Zentangle method, and I looked into it a little bit more. Um, and it was kind of that sparked this change, I suppose, because obviously, you're having to deal with all the admin side, but you also, losing a parent brings you to reflect a lot on what you're doing with your life, and
Yeah.
what's next for you, and what's kind of, you feel like an anchor almost has been lost,
Yeah.
to who you were or who you have grown up being. um
I've I've said a lot, when someone close to you dies, your perspective of what's important in life changes. And I think
Absolutely.
you're referring to this a very same thing. Yeah.
I think so, yeah. You kind of have to reevaluate things almost. And
Yeah.
obviously, like, this happened in early 2023. So we'd also been through a huge shift in everything, really, with COVID. And so
Yes.
things really were, I felt a little bit adrift, and I didn't really know what was next for me. Because I'd been self-employed for a long time, and I was starting to feel a little bit like my where I was going with my business was not necessarily where I wanted it to be. My
And you
children,
also, yeah, you also lost a support. You said early, I don't know if it was in the pre-call or here, but your mom helped you a lot. Like you also
yeah,
lost support.
absolutely. I mean, she wasn't around the corner, but she would always be here to, help and take
Yeah.
the kids if we needed it. Um, but I think, my children growing older and thinking ahead, like, they were, when I was working at weddings a lot more, I was out of the house at the weekends, and my
Mm.
children, which when my children were younger was great, because I could do with the break at the weekend
Yes.
and having an adult conversation. Whereas when as they began to go to school and like a nursery, being out of the house in the week, I was then out at the weekend and wasn't seeing them. So I was already feeling like I wanted some kind of shift, anyway. But I feel like when I discovered all of my mum's art materials and looked deeper into what it was that she'd found a connection with when it came to the Zentangle method, it really kind of something clicked for me. And I was looking into, of the week before she passed, she'd booked for us to go on a weekend retreat somewhere in the UK. We were going to go, and we were going to learn how to do Tunisian crochet together at this workshop. And I was really excited. It was in the September. She passed in the March, and it was in the September. And I didn't want to go by myself, so I
Mm.
cancelled uh, that that weekend. And I was looking at the Zentangle website and found that they had a teacher training seminar that same weekend scheduled.
Mm.
And it felt to me like, I'm not a huge believer in, fate and things, but it felt very separate, serendipitous to me um, that it was kind of meant to be almost. And also, a few things had been sorted with the admin side, and I had a pay, because I was obviously thinking about the how to pay for the cost of it, and a
Yeah.
payment from one of her pensions came through that almost covered exactly the cost of the seminar. So I just felt like she was giving me a
See,
nudge.
yeah, well, yeah, I do too, because I don't believe there are coincidences. So I think
Yes,
the universe provides exactly what we need and how we need it in the time we need it. So I
exactly.
think it
And
was
so,
divinely timed for you.
yeah, I feel like all these things kind of came together, and I often feel quite sad that, because I having done this now, and built up this business around this thing that my mum loved so much, I feel like she would be just beside herself to know that I was sitting doing this thing that she loved so much almost every day, and building.
Yeah.
And I talk to people in the community, the Zentangle community, because there's a really thriving Zentangle community all around the world, and I talk to people who she knew well. She would speak to on a weekly basis in online classes, or she would go and see in person and do different kind of activities with. So it's quite funny, really. I feel like I have to kind of stop myself sometimes and remember that actually I'm sort of like treading in her footsteps a little bit.
Mm. Does
um
it make you feel closer to her?
I think it does, yeah. I have some of her pieces of artwork that are yet to be finished. They're just in a little box under my desk, and I haven't had the time to, but I feel like I need to sit and really
Mm.
focus on kind of finishing what she started when it comes to those, because
Yeah.
um it would be nice to finish them.
Yeah. I would like to go back. You said that processing was in bursts.
I think so. Yeah. I think when I obviously it was seeing people and talking to people, I would switch from being quite, resilient, like let's just crack on, we have to,
Yep. Yep.
especially when you're a parent, you do have to just carry on, because like my kids at the time were 5 and 2, so they,
Young.
really didn't have much of an idea. My daughter remembers my mum. My son knows who she is because there's photos, and but he doesn't
Yep.
remember, have any physical memories of her. Um, and I think when you have to just get on the treadmill and keep going, it was only when you see certain people or you speak to certain people that things suddenly, like a door opens, and
Yeah.
things and the emotion kind of comes flooding out. And I certainly found that, I remember walking into her house for the first time after she'd passed, and I just didn't feel, I didn't like burst into tears on walking in. I found it eerie and odd. But then I found a photograph that she'd had on the side of us when we were kids with her, and then that set me off.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of, I think it was for me like releasing in bursts, because you have to
Yeah.
keep going. But I do think that, especially through doing this, it gives you time to sort of quiet down in your mind and think.
Mhm.
Um, and I've been doing that, for it's been 2 years now since she passed, and I think I've just been doing that gently through this mindful kind of art form, I suppose.
Yeah.
And but you know, working through things and thinking through things, because we've only just kind of sorted all the admin side out, really. Um, and it becomes a bit again like we have to do this and now we have to do that, and then suddenly it's 2 years later. Um,
Mm.
but yeah.
Thank you for explaining that. I've never heard it put that way,
Mm,
but yet as I thought about even like the death of my own son, like processing in bursts, like yes,
hmm.
yes. And yeah, so thank you for just the way you said it hit me differently. I appreciate
Mm,
that. So what was you talked about that visceral experience of your body when you
hmm.
first learned that your mother died. What else came from what other messages has your body kind of let you become aware of, or what have you noticed in the past 2 years?
Well, that's interesting you should say that, actually, because so my mum died of like an aneurysm, so a heart
Yep.
failure, essentially. And um, for a while, we were in the process of trying to sell our property at the time, and for a while between losing her and um, And I suppose in the last year, or since the beginning of the year, I'd been to see our doctor about it because I was feeling like I was having kind of almost palpitations, but not anything kind of significant. Like it would just, I would feel this kind of like thump in my chest,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was worried that I had some sort of heart condition because my
Mm-hmm.
mother's father had passed away at age 62, um, of a heart attack. And then obviously my mum passed when she was just before her 64th birthday. So, um, very, very young. And I
Yeah.
was, I guess, starting to bit worried that there was something wrong with me, and I wanted to go and get checked out basically. So, I had lots of tests at the GP, and they did like a echocardiogram,
Mm-hmm.
lots of blood
Mm-hmm.
tests and things, and nothing. They said, yeah, nothing's up. But I was
Mm-hmm.
still there. I was still feeling this, this thumping in my chest when I would lie down at the end of the day and relax, and I'd feel it.
Mm.
And honestly, like since we moved house, and then since I've been doing my artwork, I would say, um, I've really noticed that. I mean, I've barely noticed it at all since this year. It's really interesting actually, because it hadn't really occurred to me that that was the case until, you know, not that long ago. I
Yeah.
sort of realized that I haven't noticed that feeling at all, really. Um,
That's awesome.
I know it's crazy, really, but I think it's like stress, and it's dealing with all of the stuff I had to sort out, not only with my mum's estate and selling her house and clearing the house and selling the house, but also selling our own property. Like,
Yeah.
I think stress does crazy things to you.
Yes. Well, but it's also the whole well of emotions too, right? Like, and everything you just said, like overwhelm, all this list of all these things we've got to do, that adds pressure to our
Mhm.
to our to our physical bodies, whether we are really acknowledging it or not. And you made the comment earlier, it's like, well, when you talked about processing was in bursts because life's going on. You still have these kids to take care of, right? And so sometimes we push away that overwhelm, we push away those feelings that are welling up within us because we do have to keep going on. Yet we all know that we can't continue. At some point, we can't keep pushing down and suppressing what's welling within us. We've got to look at it and deal with it. And it sounds to me as if, so I want to lead into, is that what your soul was guiding you and really kind of drawing this art form of meditation, the Zentangle method, to you as a way to process all that was going on within you?
I think you could absolutely say that. I think that it's been amazing how just kind of quietening your brain down and focusing. And I think, like you say, you kind of have a what's what they say, what's for you won't go past you.
Mm,
And I think that there's definitely kind of, I think sometimes when you talk about dealing with emotion, I think sometimes it's easy to feel like, well, I'm going to have to sit here and deal with these emotions, I'm going to have to cry it out, and I'm going to have to yell and scream and shout and deal with it. And I don't think it is necessarily that. I think just little bits at a time also kind of help you process these things, and you can deal with something slowly and a bit at a time, rather than having a big epiphany, um, that kind of
yeah,
it sounds messy, doesn't it, when you talk about dealing with these feelings and dealing with emotions. But I
yeah,
think working through things gradually, when you have little pockets of time to do that at the end of the day, when you can sit down and just, rather than watch the news and sit and scroll through your phone and and end
right,
up feeling
right.
worse, like switching off and focusing on something else
I
where
think you
you're
said it I think you said it beautifully in that it doesn't have to be big and heavy and I have to sit and deal with it because as you were painting that picture I could feel my whole insides go, I don't avoid that. I don't
yeah,
want like
exactly.
I don't have time for that. I don't want to do that. Like I could just feel all that happening within me and then my mind was like sometimes my mind just said, as you were talking, like, you just need to acknowledge the emotion. And
Yeah.
so that's what I've learned for me. I simply just have to name whatever the emotion is that I think I'm feeling. And that is enough for my whole body to go, yep, you got the message.
Yeah.
And I
And
don't have to sit in
yeah, I
all
definitely
of
think
it.
so. It's interesting you saying that actually, because that's one of the things I try to do with my kids. And I feel like perhaps it's different to the way that I was brought up, in that I try to, especially when they're younger than they are now, I try to tell them, name their emotion when I can see it in them. Because
Yep.
I think sometimes as adults, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but I would say, like, when I would be upset, sometimes my parents would say, well, just go and sit over there and come out when you can be
Yes.
nice. come and see me again
Yes.
when you've stopped grizzling. um and I think that doesn't necessarily help you to process how you feel about something, because my daughter gets cross because I won't buy her some sweets at the shop. Well, then she probably feels that's unfair, and that why can't so those are things that she's feeling, and I might know with an adult's brain that it's just a silly trivial thing, like she could deal with
Right.
it. But when you're 5 6, you know you don't know, it feels unfair, like why do I, and then you feel upset, and you feel maybe jealous of that child over there who's
Yep.
been allowed to have whatever. And so if you can help them to identify how they feel and name those emotions when they're younger, it gives them better coping mechanisms for as they grow. And that's something I've tried to do with my children, because I think a lot of adults find it difficult to process those
Yes.
emotions.
Yeah. So I say kudos to you. So kudos to you.
It doesn't
And
always work,
oh, I
sometimes.
know. Yes.
Sometimes when they're frustrating, but I try to be focused on
Yeah.
helping them with that, because it's a
Yeah.
tool as they grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So hmm, would you say, was there a moment of pause or surrender or a clear decision that moved you into the, into the art process?
You mean the starting a business, or moving towards the art form itself?
Just the art form itself, because you began to use it as a tool to help you with your healing, right?
I think so. I wasn't necessarily doing that consciously. I've always liked sitting down of an evening and creating and doing something crafty. I used
Mm-hmm.
to knit. I still knit and crochet, and this was something that felt accessible and easy, and it was, I'd never done it before, but when I sort of started, I was like, oh, there's something here, and this is making me feel better.
Mm.
Um, and so I just carried on, and then I learned how to teach it. It wasn't necessarily a kind of I know this is going to make me feel better, I will sit and do this. I think in the past I've tried meditation. Um, I've had the apps and I've listened to the recordings of the meditations, and that's very nice, but you don't necessarily make time for it, because it's
Yeah.
just sitting and sitting and listening, and it's easy to feel like you're doing it wrong if you sit and you listen to a meditation and then you find, like, I think I might have mentioned, like, if you think that your mind is wandering and you're thinking of the shop that you've got to do, or running through your
Yeah.
to-do list when you should be sitting and being mindful. um, it's easy to feel like you're not doing it right. And I think that doing this is almost meditation without really realizing that you're meditating. It's the Zentangle method says, like, you drawing anything is possible one stroke at a time. And so all you're doing at any one time excuse me, is drawing the next line, and you don't think about what's coming in half an hour or in the next 10 minutes. You just, this is the next line I'm drawing now. And you can obviously think and make decisions about creating something, but at the end of the day, it's not, it doesn't matter. It's just a bit of paper, really. Like,
Mm.
it's the process of doing it, I think. And when I started, I was thinking maybe more of the outcome, because you sit down to knit a jumper and you end up with a jumper at the end of it. You know, you're not
Mm,
necessarily
mm.
doing it to knit. You know, my friends had a baby, I'll sit down and knit a baby's hat. I'm sitting down so I can knit a baby's hat. Whereas with this, I started sitting down so I could create a piece of art. But actually, really now, or as I did it more, I found that I was sitting down to enjoy the process.
So what I heard is, so knitting the baby's hat or the jumper is a doing activity, whereas what you're finding with this sitting and making a piece of art through the Zentangle method is just being and
Yeah.
allowing to come out however it needs to be.
Yes, that's exactly it. And that's what, that's kind of key to it, is that there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah,
With if you knit a jumper, you might slip a stitch, and then you've got to, or you realize that you've done the pattern wrong 3 lines ago, and you have to unpick
yeah,
everything and redo it
yeah,
because it's wrong. Whereas when you create art with the Zentangle method, there is no such thing as a mistake. You can't do it wrong. And that's how I find it's different, because I've never really seen myself as artistic or a drawer. Like if I sat down to I don't know, draw a still life of a bowl of fruit or something, then I would think, well, my apple looks all wonky. It
mm,
doesn't look like the apple in front of me that I'm trying to recreate. Whereas when you do this, because you're drawing non-representational patterns, you can't you can't do it wrong. It
yeah,
might not go how you hoped it would or you thought it would, but it's not wrong. It's just how it came out on
yeah,
your tile at that time. And you can try it again next time, because at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper, and
mm,
it's the process of doing that. And I think it's quite freeing, because if you're a recovering perfectionist like I am, it is very freeing in that way as well.
yeah.
So there's lots of elements to it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what would you say has been one of your biggest epiphanies that have come through this process for you?
Well, I've always found it difficult, through my previous, or my I say previous, I'm still doing my other job as well, but the previous thing that I was focusing more of my time on, is like comparisonitis, and comparing yourself
Mm,
to other people, and to um seeing what other people are doing and thinking, oh well, I'm not doing as well as them, or they've got more clients than me, or their work is better than mine, or why can't my stuff look like theirs. I think that's been a big thing in starting this new venture, following, you know, um, following the passing of my mum, because I think also, like we sort of touched on before, you sort of end up thinking, well, life is short. There's no
mm,
point in me worrying about it. Like there's no point in me, you know, delaying speaking on this podcast, or applying to do this thing, or I went, I went to I was fortunate enough that I was able to afford to go to the States to attend a kind of a gathering of Zentangle teachers, and
mhm,
I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't, because I've only been doing it for this long, and I'm probably not as good as everyone. I won't know anyone, and they're all going to be really good, and they've been doing it for years and years, and I'm just this newbie who's turning up. But actually, like, I feel like that's been quite an epiphany for me, is that you just have to do stuff, because if you don't, like, no one else is going to do it for you. And I
yeah,
think a big epiphany for me since losing my mum is that, we're here for a good time, not a long time. you know we need to
well, that's
just
good.
you need to just do stuff and enjoy and grab hold of things while you have opportunities, if you have the means to do
Yeah,
stuff, and just take the bull by the horns, really. um
yeah,
and I think that's been quite a key thing, because I could quite easily have not set up a business teaching this. I think it would have been very easy for me to just, you know, not follow that path. Um, but I think it's been a good decision.
what nudged you to follow the path of becoming a teacher to teach it?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, it felt like things were nudging me in that direction, when it was the training was that same weekend, when
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and I was sort of thinking, well, mum would love this. Mum, and you know, I got the money to even to cover it, like, you know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was the big nudge, because I was sort of thinking, well, it's a lot of money to do just to kind of, when I haven't really been doing it that long by that point. You know, she passed in the March, and then I went and learned how to teach it in the September, and
Yeah.
I'd barely done any drawing of it really before I decided to sign up to do it. um, but I do think that it was kind of, you know, I wouldn't say waiting for me necessarily, but it feels like it was the right way for me to, it was the right path for me to take at that time. And it still is, I think, because I really sit down and I'm drawing every day, and I'm, you know, teaching other people to draw and sharing
Yeah.
this kind of, it's more than I thought it was when I started drawing.
Mm.
Um, it's these little pockets of time that you can reconnect with yourself, but it's also physical as well. You know, like there's so much these days where you're on your phone or you're typing at a keyboard or you're, you know,
Yeah.
and actually I don't think I'd really picked up a pen and used a pen as much as I have in the last, you know, the last 2 years since I've been doing this. It reconnects you with that physical kind of hand-eye coordination and fires up the synapses, and it's got this, it's a kind of magical pain relieving thing, like, and stress relieving. You know, I had a bad day the other day, and I was like, I had to sit down and record some of this course that I am running, some videos for my website, my course, and I needed to sit and record this video, and I was like, oh, I just feel really, I don't know, I just don't feel like I'm in the mood for it right now, but no, I have to do it. So I sat down, and whatever it was that had been stressing me out beforehand, by the time I finished recording my lesson, I just felt like lighter. You know, I felt like the stress thing that was in my brain was just gone.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
it's, yeah, it's quite amazing, really.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, last question, Becky. If someone is like kind of sitting in a similar moment right now, whether, they've just lost something or if they're just maybe even feeling uncertain and unclear or just uncomfortable, whatever it is, what would you just offer to them from your own experience?
I think to, for really, I would say that you can just sort of take things one day at a time, you know,
Mm.
one step at a time, and just do the next thing you have to do. And you don't have to feel a certain way. Like, I think I felt when I lost my mum, like, I sort of felt like, oh, I should be feeling much more sad right now. And it wasn't that I wasn't sad. I might not have been sat in floods of tears, but I mean, obviously people experience grief in many different ways. um you don't have to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
You can deal with deal with things however you are dealing with them, because that's the way that you're dealing with them, and that's right. That's the best way for you. um and I would say that you know, if you can find some time to just sit and not necessarily be sitting, your brain's not processing necessarily, like, you know, sitting scrolling through your phone is we all know really not great for us to do, especially, you know, of
Yeah.
an evening at the end of the day when we've had a busy day. If you can, and you know, sitting and just meditating and sitting and thinking with thoughts can be difficult, you know. So find something that you can do, that you can kind of put your focus to, that is keeping your brain focused on something and allowing you to just process things in the background, you
Yeah.
know. And that's what, you know, that's one of the things that you know, I say when I teach my Zentangle classes. You know, I teach online and I teach in person, and a lot of people come to it from just because they fancy trying a new art craft, you know. But I think there's more to it than that, and I think that finding something, whatever that might be for you, whether that's Zentangle or whether that's something different, where you can just sit with a bit of a quiet focus,
Mm-hmm.
is, yeah, is a really good thing to kind of help you
Yeah.
process things a little bit at a
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I am definitely very guilty of using my phone and my scrolling as the distraction.
Hmm.
Very much
Yeah.
guilty of that. Even though I still have very much built-in rituals and practices in my daily life,
Mm.
it is very easy to distract myself when
Yes.
sitting intentionally to allow the body. I love how you said it. It's just sitting and allow your body and your mind to process. And we can't allow that when we're distracted or we're all consuming all the time.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be like sometimes I think that sounds scary, sitting and processing. Like I'm going to
Yes.
sit and I'm really
Yes.
going to process these feelings. Can
Yes.
be like because you don't know necessarily what you might find at the end of it. And I don't think I've ever had like a huge outpouring of, grief or anything when I've been sat drawing, but it
Yep.
quiets your mind enough from the distractions of your everyday,
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
that's work or whether that's kids or whether that's just your phone. Your phone is a device that's designed to keep you distracted and keep your brain like it's all the dopamine when you flick through the screens and stuff. That's it's addictive in its design. um and just find as simple as finding something that is not doing that you can sit and do. You don't have to be like, I mean, obviously I'm talking about Zentangle because that's what I do, but you don't have to be artistic. You don't have to be able to draw anything. And
Right.
with Zentangle they say if you can write the letters I, C, S, and O, then you can create any of the patterns that you would see someone else create because all of the patterns are broken down one step at a time into those different pen strokes. And if you can create, it's just putting together a combination of those little bits that
Hmm.
creates these bigger things.
Hmm.
And so you don't have to have, you might think, oh, I'd like to try some craft because everyone, people say that art and craft is very mindful and good for our mental health, but people don't know where to start. It's too expensive or it's too difficult to get hold of the materials, or it takes me a long time to learn. Like it'll take you ages to learn how to knit maybe, or embroider, or whatever, or oil paint. But with this you just need paper and a pen, and you can sit down and I've got courses and lessons and things, but I've also got free YouTube videos where you can just follow them along, and it's for 10 minutes and just get a little nugget of time to focus. And I think that's you know
Yeah.
it's accessible and easy for people.
Yeah. All of that's going to be in the show notes. So thank you for saying all that. This has been such a fascinating conversation. And I do remember when I was reviewing your application and I went to the website, like the Zentangle method, it was intriguing to me. I'm not an artist in any way, shape, or form, but it
Yeah,
is
you don't need to
intriguing
be
to
though.
me. I know. And after listening to you and hearing you, it's like, I might have to check it out just a little bit more and see, if my soul and my body are nudging me in that direction. Because a lot of times I get really excited in the moment and I have to
Yeah,
sit and wait for the answer because that's how my body works. I have to sit and wait for the answer. But
yeah, yeah.
Becky, thank you for coming on the podcast today
Well,
and
thank you for
to,
having me.
yes, to offer this hope and inspiration. And I'm hoping that our listeners, you know, heard something today. I'm I'm pretty much guarantee they did. Heard something today that met them where they're at. And thank you for showing up with such openness and presence and sharing a little bit about that.
Oh,
Death is
thank
not
you.
easy. Grief is
Yeah,
not easy.
no, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And so, to our listening friends, if this conversation stirred something within you, I invite you to take a moment and pause, and reflect. What was for me in this conversation? What is my soul being drawn to? And then either go journal about it or share that awareness with a friend. Allow your body to integrate what's new for you. You can find all the links to Becky and in the show notes. And until next time, keep leaning into your truth and honoring your journey. This is Brenda Stott Tomlinson, and you're listening to the Mind, Body, Soul Mastery.